Tom, I feel like most of the shows, we talk about this topic and try to land on, okay, so here's our action step or whatnot. But for this one, I felt like leading with that. So if everybody wants to listen to the show for 5 minutes and be done, hey, here you go. Here's your opportunity. Because what it just brought me to, as so often these topics get me thinking about myself, my own reality, and the things that I can do to benefit from this. And it made me want, and I did it actually, to take an audit of what are some of the highlight things in my business. I tried to keep it focused there because we can go into our life and that'd be good as well. But just for the purpose of this show, what are the things in my business, in my work that I cannot control? So period. What's that? I think just that, just being aware, what a great exercise for all of us to do. So I would encourage everybody to do that, just to sit down and list out the things so they don't come up and surprise you, that you get them on the table and you can't control them. Then of course, the two ideas that came to me, Tom, were what can I do, of course, to mitigate them, to lessen them, to do something to where I can control or I get that out of there. But still there's going to be some things that I just can't. And so, as to what your dad just said in the message we just played, what can I do to have ready my response? I mean, just think about that. Think about the average person when you ask them, how'd your work day go? And it's going to be good or bad based on the circumstantial things that they can't control that either worked in their favor or not. And that's what dictated outside of their control, whether it was a good day or a bad day. How can we take those things, put them on the table, and they'll never be a surprise? And we can then, to some degree, ensure maybe not every day is good, but for the most part, every day is gooder. What do you think?
I love it. Yeah. And, we've heard it over and over again. Well, the only thing we can really control is ourselves. I mean, that's like a tried and true statement that we can reflect on. But then, how many of us really dig into in our work environment, whatever that is, the things that we can't control, and then what we can control as our response to that?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the big things, and so you know, I just had a call just before this, and they had a sales challenge, and they were asking for some sales advice, and I said, well, can you tell me what the top 7 objections are?
Mhm.
And so that's in business, and especially on the sales side. What are the reasons that people say no or say not yet? Because we know statistically that there are going to be 2 or 3 common objections. It costs too much, or it's the wrong color, or the timing's not right, or whatever it is, And so if you know those in advance, then what we need to do is change our word from forget about control. What can I influence?
Yeah.
And so when we get, and then we understand that it's going to be all about influencing someone or a situation to the benefit of that person,
Right.
right? And I think we get in trouble when we try to influence or another word is control, put pressure on a situation that's not in that person's best interest.
Interesting. Can we dig in right there? And I do have some, maybe we'll get to them, maybe we won't. I have some people who respond, but I want to dig in right there with what you said with influence. So you and I are self-employed, and I always have. And I can't say that I conceived of this conscientiously, like I put it down, totally aware, but I know now in retrospect, and I do currently, that a lot of the reason I did is because I do like to have control. And that is not a right or wrong. And there are plenty of people that's not a big issue to them. They probably have more easily, maybe some peace in their lives, with that. But I do want to have control. So I admit that. But when you talk about influence, really in going through this exercise, Tom, and listening to your dad's message and going and me doing my own audit, I realized I probably tend to think I have more control. But when you said influence, I thought that I kind of feel like I can influence everything, which to some degree is, that's fair to say, isn't it? I mean, we do have an amazing amount of influence on everything. When as a self-employed guy, I feel like I can. And I wonder if that's lulled me into feeling like I should have control of everything. And now when I come back and I'm doing this proactive thing, it's really giving me a little bit of insight of me. I don't have as much control over as many things as I do. And that's a great opportunity as a source of frustration for me, as opposed to coming back and maybe being a little more admitting that I don't have control over. Again, I didn't mean to come into this perspective, but it's given me that. I wonder if there are a lot of business people out there, a lot of entrepreneurs who want to have control and are maybe not as aware that there are some things that we can't. I don't even like saying that, actually. I don't like admitting that.
I mean, we all love control, right? Because then everything revolves around us. You know,
Unfortunately, I would say I'm not, I don't have a big problem with that, Tom. Yeah.
so let me just kind of give you my career and stages. So I moved
Please.
into sales,
Yep.
and oh my gosh, in my beginning, I hated no's. You know, hey, what do you think? No, and because you know, it was a great opportunity for them. It would benefit them, and then they would say no, and so the lack of control, the lack of getting the desired outcome that I was hoping for, really frustrated me. And then as I matured, I realized, hey, wait a second, not everybody is ready, and but the more people that I can interact with and give the opportunity to, statistically, I'm going to win.
Mhm.
And so then I started keeping track, and I knew that every 7 no's equaled a yes. And so instead of letting my whole countenance, my whole attitude, my whole demeanor, my whole day being controlled by how many no's I got, everything was just a step in the right direction. So a no was a step in the right direction. A yes was a step in the right direction, because I wanted to impact as many lives as I could and build a profitable career at the same time.
Okay.
Well, so then I got deeper, and we already talked about that. And I said, well, how can I increase the percentage of yeses? And so I started studying, well, why do people say no? And in our business, there were 5 or 6 common objections. And so as I listened to what their needs were and started to understand where they were coming from, I could anticipate which objections would likely come to the top. And I had very both legitimate, logical, and emotional reasons that I
Right.
could share with them that would make sense for them to say yes instead of no. And then, so my influence became greater, my closing rate became greater, the satisfied client became greater, because sometimes clients will say yes just out of trust, and you don't actually educate and nurture them enough, and then they get it and they're kind of disappointed because they didn't know, because you didn't take the time to explain all the benefits that come with it,
Right.
right? And so by not doing your job on the front end, you can actually increase the likelihood of dissatisfaction after, right? And so not only did my sales go up and my close rate go up, but the number of satisfied clients went up, because I really started to understand from their perspective why they were saying no. Well, then
Okay.
I started getting really frustrated with not the yes answer, not the no answer, but the not yet answer.
Right. The not yet or the maybe. Maybe was
the
always,
maybe,
yeah.
the maybe
Yeah.
answer. And this was especially common in the larger corporate training sales. And the scenario was usually somebody representing that company would call in and want a training proposal on XYZ, and they would represent themselves as the decision maker. And of course, you know, they are actually not the final decision maker. They're an influencer in that operation. And so when I learned that I was likely to get a maybe on a lot of these cases, I would put together a package that solved all of their needs. And then I would ask them a question that has a lot of influence behind it. And the question was, when do you think you'll be making a decision on this? And I didn't care whether they said a week or 3 weeks or a month. It didn't matter to me. And I would say, great, because I've put the package together. And as long as you make your final decision by this date, which was after whatever date they gave me, you'll be able to take advantage of the incentive that we've built in. And the incentive was something that was motivating, that they had already expressed that they really wanted and would save them some money because they were getting a package of different things. And because I knew that maybe was or not yet was the most likely answer, and because I didn't have 100% clarity that they were the final decision maker, as soon as they saw that in writing in the deadline, they would all of a sudden come clean. Well, wait a second. We're going to have our meeting internally, and then I've got to turn it over to the committee, and the committee will be reviewing this on these dates. And so I would say, fantastic. So besides you and that committee, who else will be making the final decision? And so out of that anticipatory, that's a big word.
I think you might have just written a new one. I like it.
Yeah.
I'll submit that to Merriam-Webster.
It, as part of this discovery in the process and the influence, I was able to gain, hey, what is their real decision timeline? Who are the real decision makers?
Right.
And a lot of things that go on. So even though I have no control over whether they say yes or no, if I do my job right and really serve their need and understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then ask the right questions and create the right result, they are much more likely to share with me, the key buyers and influencers and everybody else who's going to be in part of it. And so the pillow head question would be, so at night, as professionals with the desire to see great outcomes in every area of our life, the question that we ask ourselves as we fall asleep is, did I serve them well?
Right.
And if we can say yes to that, then fantastic, because this is what I know. The longer they wait to take action on my proposal, the longer before they get the results of what we're going to bring to them are. And those results are going to get them closer to their purpose, their why, their dream, their goal, their objective.
Okay.
And so,
Go ahead.
yeah. And so I need to have that falling asleep, complete confidence that I've done everything in my ability to influence them to not only make the right decision for their benefit, but to do it as soon as possible.
Well, so we're talking to the heart of sales here, which was, again, that's why I love the discussions, because they take us down different roads. And because you're making that assumption that this is an ethical sale. This is something that you have discerned it will truly benefit them. And they probably came to you knowing that they want this and it will benefit them. So if we have that as an assumption that this is something that's going to benefit this person, we are selling boats to people in an area that's going to flood and they're going to drown without it. So if we have that assumption, and then because you've got me playing with the word control, Tom. So I love words, and I looked up the quick definition. It says it's the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. Now, power, that's a word that people struggle with, but to say you have a skill, you have an ability, you have a wherewithal to help influence or direct people's behavior. So if this is something that can help them, it's to help them overcome the real or perceived obstacles that are keeping them from this thing that will help them, whether it's money, time. Just, I think these days some people have such decision burnout that we just have to help them make a decision, or their propensity, which I fall to a lot these days, is I just don't want to make a decision and just forget it. So I'm going to do nothing. We know that that's the greatest option with any sales, not yes or no, but back to you, maybe, or am I, whenever, and ultimately just doing nothing. Because what you said a second ago, let me click back over here, is you talked about, I came to the premise of this show of what do you do about the things that you cannot control? And yet you kept playing back and forth there, Tom, when you were talking early, especially at the beginning, about control and influence. And to that degree, now you've kind of got me thinking about, what can I not have some influence and some control over? Maybe my effort here is to realize that there's very little that I don't have some control over. Maybe think of the movie. I'm trying to think of oh shoot, Hunger Games. I think it was Hunger Games. Wasn't that the one where the going off phrase, instead of Star Wars, let the force be with you, it's may the odds ever be in your favor? Did I get that right?
Something
Something
like that.
Something like that. Well, because you don't know, this is show 878. In show 877, which I just recorded moments ago with my dad, we talked about relationships and the power, let's say, of nurturing any and every relationship. Doesn't matter if it's the grocery bagger at the store, or whether it's the CEO you're trying to sell to. The power of advocating for every relationship, treating everyone with utmost respect, care, love, because one, it's the right thing to do. And two, because it has such a long tail of possible benefit and reciprocity for you, the power of that. And what it is, and so I got to that thing of, we're talking about, or we can control the odds. We can stack the odds in our favor with these things that we think we cannot control. Because as you were talking about sales at the beginning, you realize, okay, here's my numbers. If I do these many sales, I can't control whether they say yes or no, but I can do a lot to influence that. And I can do a lot to influence the amount of sales I get at the end of the day by looking at the odds, looking at the stats, looking at the percentages, and following that algorithm then. And I can pretty much assure myself at the end of the day, if I do the work, that at the average is going to be that I do have a lot of control. So I'm taking a different tangent here that I didn't intend to, Tom, because as we're looking at this, and my intent initially was to say, how can we get these things that we feel like we can't control on the table, be aware of them so that we can, as your dad said, respond better in health, have more peace, have more success as a result of that. Okay, I would say that still stands, but you really had me thinking along the lines of, what we're putting up in the air of is, really, what do we not have? If we're proactive, if we're wise, if we look at this, we really have an ability to control a dramatic amount. So I'm kind of looking back at my little list and going, can I really not control, or have some control over those, by being aware of the influence and then helping the odds be forever in my favor? What do you think?
Well, it's reminding me of a quote, and I don't know if Dad said it or if he was quoting a psychologist. I think he was
We know that when
quoting.
in doubt on a quote, Zig Ziglar said it.
Yeah, but he said this, and I think he was quoting a psychologist, and I can't remember their name.
Hmm.
And the quote is this: "No one can make you feel inferior without your permission."
Yeah.
Now that is an overwhelming statement. No one can make you feel inferior without your permission.
I've heard or thought the same thing with being offended. I can't be offended unless I
You give
allow myself to
permission.
be. Yeah, that's good.
And but we all grow up in families, and we have family members. Almost all of us have family members who can say one thing and immediately we're on the emotional roller coaster, right?
Right.
Because of history, because of past events, because of things, wounds that we might have, or whatever. And so when we talk about influence or control, I'm going to move from the sales example, which is, both sides trying to come to an agreement where they can work together for something good. But the bigger one that we face every day is the difficult person problem. It's
Right.
like, so the difficult person could be somebody in your own company. It could be a friend or a family member. It could be a prospect or a customer. Um, and so now we have to think about, wait a second, I am going to come across difficult people in life. And so the question is, are they being difficult because of something I did or didn't do? Or are they being difficult because of the circumstances that they find themselves in,
Right.
or some issue that's 100% their own issue. And what I've discovered is that in the vast majority of cases, difficult people become that way. Should we call them well, I don't want to pick on Karens, but that's the buzzword that's going around.
Unfortunately, so sorry to everyone. I know beautiful people named Karen. I'm so sorry, but we
So,
also go to the John, and I know a lot of great Johns. So
yes, exactly.
it's an avatar out there. It exists. Right.
And so we've got to, what I say is we have 100% control of our own response, our own mindset, our own belief. And why not choose in advance how to handle the difficult people?
Yeah.
And the first thing that I do when I come across a difficult person is I say, "What if, let's just say they're going off the deep end, and I've talked about this, would a secure person do that?" And the answer is no, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And then the second, if I'm like, well, they seem pretty secure, but they sure are frustrated. And then I ask the next question, is it because of a system that they're, a circumstance, an issue they have internally that makes them so frustrated? Or not but the or is it something that we've done intentionally or unintentionally that's adding to this that I can now be a help in fixing?
Yeah.
Right. And if the answer is I can be a help in fixing, why not come to the middle and say, hey, man, I see your frustration. Let's figure this out. I can only imagine if it's not your responsibility or you're any cause of it or the group you're working with is any cause of it, you can still say, hey, I can understand your frustration. Let me see how I can help. What is it that's happened? But in both of those cases, I am not allowing that toxicity from them to transfer to me because I've already decided, hey, this is about the circumstance or this is about something that they've been through, and I'm here to help.
Well, I want to pick on what you just said there. As far as that is a great goodness exercise again to write down, as you said, that would a secure person do that? Now, the easiest thing for us to do is to think about somebody else who, you know, bothers, irritates us, and to point that at them. Hey, would a secure person do that? Would a secure person act that way? Would they react that way? Would they speak that way? And we can real quick point the finger. But if we turn it back on ourselves and to think about our own behaviors and our own, because again, when we're talking about control, what comes up is the things that we can't control are generally the things that we expect to irritate us, right? That's what makes the day a bad day, because something happened that I couldn't control and it made me have a bad day. It makes me have a bad day. It makes the workplace difficult. It makes home difficult. It makes, whatever. And would a secure person react if I turn that on myself and look at every daily frustration or consistent frustration or whatever, say, gosh, would a secure person feel the way that I am feeling? And I feel like we'd be remiss, Tom, to not point out that as we talk about this issue of control, and now you brought up secure, and I'm going to, the converse of that is insecure, that when we have a culture more media influence than ever today, I believe, would you agree?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%.
So if we do, we know that the media from the dawn of time, if it bleeds, it leads. So if it is drama, if it's negative, it leads. So that's what they are paid to do, is to get attention. So they know if it does. And I would say that today it feels like we are at an all-time high of the media. What bleeds most? Feeding off of our insecurities. And if you look at the headlines today or any day, it's almost like they have what's the culture's primary insecurities? What can we do to pick on that one? What can we do to exacerbate that one? What can we do to stick a fire in that one? That's what draws people. And that's what leads. Point being, though, not to sit here and talk about the negativity of the media, but just to realize, how does that impact us? The expectation is that we are upset about the things that we can't control, that we are insecure about these things, that we are reacting, not responding, as Zig said in the initial aspect. And I love that statement. I feel like that's a paramount piece then of this topic that we're talking about, control. How would a secure person react to those things we can't control? And I would agree with you, Tom, that it seems like culturally and for most people, the things that I'm tempted to say, what is the number one thing we can't control, that we can't control? So you said it before, that we tend to think in personal development, the number one thing that we can't control is ourselves. What is the number one thing out there environmentally, circumstantially, that we cannot control? It's got to be other people. Is there anything further at the top?
Oh
I mean,
no.
if I think of my head, we didn't have, I'll tell you, Tom, we didn't have anybody in the responses. We had nobody say their health. Now, culturally, we have a lot of people that don't think that they're as control as their health as what we would say. Nobody cited that. Nobody cited money. I was surprised. Nobody cited, opportunity. They didn't cite that. But people, man, that's got to be in my own life. That's got to be top of the list of the things that I have, especially if it's somebody new. If you're dealing with customers, prospects, vendors, people that you don't have a long history with, that you're not that you're not influencing, that's got to be top of the list. So what a better thing to realize. How would a secure person, if I was secure, how would I respond to the next person that I may run into, who, as you said, is, how did you frame them, is just in a bad way, just an unkind person,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. So they're coming in and they're really upset.
Yeah.
And they're going off, right? They're going off at a different level. So
And maybe taking it out on you, literally, not just,
yeah.
yeah.
So there's a great G.K. Chesterton quote that I love, and he says, "Do not remove a fence post before you know why it was there."
Okay.
So what he's talking about is there's boundaries, and our culture is on this mission to eliminate all the boundaries. Well,
True.
right. Have you heard the term "fences make great neighbors"?
Hmm.
Yeah. So we love boundaries. And what happens is when we don't understand what a boundary is, we allow people to have influence in our life where they really should have no influence.
Mhm.
And so I've really been studying this. This has probably been going on for like the last month. So last week I broke down, and I shouldn't say broke down. I finally did the smart thing, and I got Dr. Henry Cloud's. He has a membership. Pretty cool. We've had him on the show before, and it was like $90 for the whole year.
Which, for context, if you don't know, he wrote the book Boundaries, which is an absolute classic, a top
Right.
seller, all evergreen.
Right. So now I've got hundreds of these little boundaries tips at my on my computer. So every morning for the last week, I've been doing 15 to 20 minutes of just understanding, hey, what are appropriate boundaries? And so remember that quote that I gave Dad credit for, even though he was quoting a psychologist?
Right.
No one can make you feel inferior without your permission. What that really means is if you don't have boundaries of hey, you know what, you can attack as much as you want in that area, but I've got a wall there. You don't have permission to come in. People without boundaries, they get set off at anything, and usually it goes into one of two categories, and it's really just kind of different sides of the same coin, which is the easily offended person. You mentioned that. And if you cross their boundary, they get angry and start crossing yours.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the, I don't know what the best term is, the easily hurt person, who immediately assumes that, the question or the problem or the challenge is because of something they did wrong. And they're so eager to people please that they feel guilty for that person who they met 28 seconds ago who's upset about an order, and that person's being upset with them on the phone about the order not getting there on time, and now they've taken personal ownership and responsibility for a
Right.
situation they had nothing to do with.
Right.
And so one of the things that we can do to have influence over the things we can't control is to really get clear on the boundaries that are healthy. Because ultimately, on a scale of 1 to 10, the frustration level of the person coming in, our what we want to do as a human being is we want to help them,
Gosh, yeah.
right? And so if I escalate or de-escalate at the same rate that they do, the help isn't going to happen. It's not going to be useful.
Goodness, I don't know whether to go down there if that's another show just talking about boundaries, but I guess when we're talking about control, that's what we're talking about. So when are we out of control of things that in essence cross our, I guess, cross our boundaries? Like, I literally don't quite know. I'm seldom at a loss for words here, but that one's I mean, I just don't know if it's appropriate to go into that topic, because maybe it is, because we're looking at control and we feel like we are in a reactive culture right now that apparently feels less in control, which is why they're reacting so negatively. And you're right. We have a culture that is trying so desperately, it feels like, to abolish any boundaries. And I know even just saying that's a little volatile, especially if I start putting some categories to those things that we're trying to abolish the boundaries of. But we do that. And if you cite a boundary, you are small minded, narrow minded, and a lot of negative words. And yet, we've got, and I'll just name some categories without giving any judgment, politics and gender and race and morals and ethics and the latest music winning awards that is very boundary crossing. And I honestly saw, I don't watch the news, don't have regular TV. I haven't seen a screen in a week. I've been on vacation, but I was in a place last night and the news was on, and it was about a music video from somebody I didn't even know about, some music artist in the country-ish realm, in this video that's, just getting everybody's getting everybody ruffled and whatnot. And it is crossing boundaries. It's abolishing boundaries. And yet you're right. Over here, we're finding people like Henry Class saying, man, we find safety and health in boundaries. And I was a show recently, Tom, and I cited that study done long ago. And my quick paraphrase is the one where they put a bunch of kids, with their teachers at a playground in the middle of a vast field with no fences. You talked about fences, no fences, no boundaries. And they just watched them and watched as the kids all stayed close to the playground, stayed close to the teachers. Then, day two or whatever it was, they put a fence pretty far out, but they put a fence around that. And what happened? Everybody went to the edges. Everybody explored further than that. I literally don't like it. I don't feel good about that analogy, Tom, because I want to say I'm the rebel. I want space. I want freedom. I don't want any fences. And yet this is just, they didn't take kids by gender, by personality style. They just put a smattering of kids out there and they all did the same thing. And to look at that and go, man, what is it about our psychology? Right, wrong, whatever you want to call it, but it just is. Here's a bunch of kids, no boundaries. They stay close to home. Insecurity. You put
Right.
some boundaries out there, some healthy boundaries, and there's freedom in that. So if we're saying that here in our life, and as you're getting from Henry Cloud, that we feel control, let's say, or we feel secure with some boundaries, and let's say healthy boundaries, which is what he's about. And yet we're in a culture that is, if you cite a boundary, especially a personal boundary, and especially if you do one, and talk about a societal boundary that you think is of health, there's literally just no place for it right now. There's hardly a place for it. And what a dichotomy is that?
So the reality is that choices have consequences. And our culture wants to divorce choice from consequence.
Absolutely.
That's what the goal is. So dad said if you take a train off the tracks, you've got all this amazing power and capacity and it goes nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You take, Elon Musk is spending billions of dollars on space and rockets. You take the navigation system out of a rocket and what do you got? You got fireworks. I mean, it's like, that's all you got, really. And so we need a navigation system. We need a track. We need boundaries to say, hey, if I go here, it's safe. If I go there, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'll give you, you brought up the hot topic of culture and all the things that are going on right now. And part of winning, and I won't say winning the conversation is the right word. Let's just say influencing the conversation
Right.
is the right word. We use the wrong words in the discussion. And I'll just give you an example. And this drives this, when I use this, it drives people nuts. I'll ask people, well, hey, do words matter? Do the words you use matter? Well, everybody, doesn't matter whether you're progressive or ultra conservative or somewhere in between. Yeah, words matter. It's like it's a battle for the words. Well, what about actions?
Mm.
Yeah, actions matter. I mean, that's really all I can judge, right? I don't know what's going on in your thought life, but I can judge your words and I can judge your actions. Okay, so now we all agree that words and actions matter. So, are you against childhood poverty? Yeah. I mean, who's not? We all are. We're all against childhood poverty. How about this? Are you against child abuse? Well, then great, fantastic. So I guess you're against the number one cause of childhood poverty and child abuse. Oh, what's that? Oh, well, I mean, do you believe the facts and science? Is that what we should go on, or should we go on opinion? No, let's go on facts and science. Okay, great. Well, facts and science tell us that the number one cause of child abuse and childhood poverty is single parent households.
Hmm.
Well, wait a second. We can't be against single parent households. Well, I'm doing a generalization here, but what is the number one cause of single parent households?
Mhm.
Well, it's sex with people who aren't married. And so the way I would reframe the word in the cultural discussion is, you know, because we want the best outcome for our kids, if you're promoting sex outside of marriage, why are you supporting childhood poverty and child abuse? Because it's the number one cause. Oh, you want to get people excited and upset. That'll get them going.
I'm sure you just did some there, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so the reason I bring this up is I was watching a TV show a couple of years ago, and it just really hurt my heart because there was a young Christian woman, and I put the word Christian because that's how she self-defined herself.
Right.
Seemed like she had everything going on, very smart, and she was on one of those dating shows, and one of the other final contestants basically said, "Hey, we can't continue the relationship because I know you slept with a couple other people on the show." And she said, "Well, hey, that's none of your business. That's my choice." And blah, 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 blah. Right. And so the media supported her and called this other person, kind of a fanatic. But here's what my heart thought: there's going to be some 16 or 17-year-old kids who are going to justify
Mhm.
doing something. And even though that lady didn't get pregnant, they're going to get pregnant.
And that's, yeah. Well, there you get down to you just mentioned, is it going to value science and the data or opinion? And I'm grateful that question right there is coming to light more and more. I don't know if it'll actually make a difference.
And so here's the thing: we're circling back to the subject at hand. Is all choices that we make have consequences.
Mhm.
And we need to own those consequences. We need to own it.
Well, we're back to where, yeah, it is a round circle back to your father, Zig Ziglar, in the clip we played, talking about, are you going to positively respond or negatively react? That's a choice. And can we do that proactively? Because I cannot foresee the person, if we're going to pick on people as one of the primary purveyors of things that we can't control. I can't even foresee the person that I may meet tomorrow at the airport, at the, well, for me, the beach, at the grocery store, in my work, a vendor, whatever. I can't, I have no ability to control whether the text, the email, the phone call, the whatever, the face to face that I may meet from that person who may be very, very difficult. But I can make a choice now as to the kind of here. I love this perspective that somebody, and I can't remember who it was somebody recently who said, kind of in defining themselves, I'm the type of person who responds this way. So who's that going to be? I want to be take an avatar, take a movie character if you need to be, and say, I want to be like that. I want to be the type of person who responds this way to this type of person, or to any, let's just say any unreasonable person, or anyone who, coming back to your boundaries, who is going to cross what to me is a boundary. And that's going to happen. So it's going to happen. How am I, what kind of person am I going to be? And well, back to you. Am I a secure person? A secure person would react this way. I want to be the kind of person who reacts in peace and security, and responds when my boundary is crossed, as it is going to be. And I actually like that even better than the word control. It has so much baggage. We can attribute so many different things to that. But when we say boundaries, to your question, or asking a question, is there anybody we would ask if we said that out loud? Is there anyone out there who has zero boundaries?
They don't live long. They
They
get hit
don't
by
live long.
cars.
Who would say yes? I have no boundaries. Really? Can I please have your wallet? And we all do. We, as much as we want to claim that, that nobody should put any boundaries on us, everybody has a line somewhere. And we have those boundaries, man. It's thank you, Tom. It's a great, you brought me to multiple things. It's going to be a fun outro, because as I took off with, as I always do, an intent in mind. I even told you what my intent is, and you still took us a better direction. Thanks for that. I didn't read any of the responses, and folks, people did write down responses, workplace things that they couldn't, market instability, people, regulation changes. Somebody said wearing the stupid, ineffective mask. Somebody doesn't like the mask at all. Administrative mandates, bullying, nepotism, good being in a rough and tumble real estate market, not having patience when you rely on other people, property managers, yada yada. We had so many people, primarily site people, and things they can't control. But if I like better this, instead of saying that, how are you going to respond to the things you can't control, to say your boundaries, we all have boundaries, they are going to be crossed. How are we going to respond to them? And I think we can look at the areas of our life. You could probably go through the Ziglar wheel of life as a good avatar and say, in each of these 7 spokes, do you have any boundaries? What are they? When they are violated, what are what type of person do you want to be? I am the type of person who's going to respond this way when this happens, or when I can't even foresee what's going to happen, when my boundaries are crossed. I love that exercise, Tom, though in my own audit here, I'm also going to be thinking about the very reality of how much control I really do have, how much influence, at least, I do have to stack the odds in my favor and feel less in control. And I do want to take responsibility for that. I mean, I want to, and I want to be the type of person who wants to, as well. And that's powerful. Thank you, brother. You brought the heat today.
Good stuff. Yeah. Hopefully it hits home. And I think ultimately it ends up with this from a spiritual perspective. I don't know if God has a lot of preference one way or another of what we do, as long as it's moral and ethical. But boy, a ton of of care and love and concern around how we do it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, if you work in a difficult situation, and if you work with people, guess what? That's you.
That's true.
It's how you respond to the things you can't control. That is the differentiator. And at the end of it, you got to ask yourself the question, hey, if everybody did what I did, would the world be a better place? And so when we own our choices, and remember, the way we lead is through influence and example.
Yeah.
So the better example we set, the more influence that we have. And so that's why that tough question is, are you promoting something that ultimately somebody else is going to copy, and they're going to pay the price that maybe you didn't have to personally pay?
Wow.
And that's a big responsibility. And so the more influence that you have, and what's interesting to me is that, and now I'm picking on Hollywood because they're easy to pick on, but or the influencers and Hollywood types will say, well, hey, I just live my life. I don't have any influence over what other people say or do. And then they'll hold up something on TikTok or Instagram and they'll get paid $100,000 because they just influenced a lot of people to go do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally true.
And so the choices that we make and what we put out there have huge implications. And once we own the consequences, good or bad, of the choice that we make, and then determine to become the person that God created us to become, then wow, we can set up boundaries. We can respond in a way that's kind and loving. And as Shanti Fieldhelm would say, just lead with kindness and the rest of it will take care of itself.
We'll call that the mic drop. Thanks.